or not on Facebook. We're probably live round about now, so I'll just blabber for a bit. And assuming we're live, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 10K Collective podcast live stream. Today we are talking about Pinterest with Craig Lewis, who is just focused on one thing, which I think is so smart. And Craig is focused on Pinterest for e-commerce, which is a great opportunity for those who get it right, and many of us are also getting it quite wrong. So, great reason to talk to an expert. Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me on. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing some of the, I guess, mistakes and just things that most business owners and e-commerce owners do. And then hopefully, like by sharing this, the people that listen to this won't make the same mistakes.
Great. Now I'm just going to double check that we are actually broadcasting to the world because according to Zoom we are, and according to my restreaming thing we're not. So let me just double check that we're live. If you're seeing us live, then maybe just pop in the comments that you're seeing us live would be very helpful. If you are with us live, then do pop any questions or comments you got in for Craig or myself. And even if that's not live, then it looks like we're appearing on Facebook. Yeah, looking good. It's very strange to hear yourself back about 5 seconds later. So bear with us, folks, while I just check the basic thing. This is why having a tech person and a presenter is always good. It's funny how over the decades you come back to the reasons why people did stuff a certain way for decades in TV, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of helpful to split the roles, but it's just little old me here for the moment. So let me just check. And I do have a VA in the Philippines working incredibly hard at all this stuff.
Yeah.
But not with me. Yeah, it looks like we're live. Amazing. So let's plunge into this then. And we're going to record the podcast, a couple of separate episodes. One is going to focus on the mistakes we're all making. And then the second one, didn't have the budget for the music. The second one is shifts in Pinterest and Pinterest traffic attribution. So quite a nerdy one for those who are really quite deep into this stuff. By the way, if you're not a bit of a nerd, I think you're going to struggle with e-commerce, to be honest. There's a lot of analytical thinking that has to go on. So that's one for the nerds. So if you're a Pinterest person, you think, I know all this stuff already, stay tuned. I think there will be some great value for you there. So let's do this thing and record a podcast. Here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers, and increasingly those who are e-commerce sellers focused on Amazon, but with traffic from lots of different places. We are talking today with Craig Lewis from Pin and Grow. Craig basically does one thing and does it really well, which I think is very smart, by the way, and that is Pinterest for e-commerce operators. So we're going to talk today about the mistakes we'll all be making and how to do better instead. So first of all, Craig, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me on.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of sharing the stuff that we've discovered that seem to be mistakes that a lot of e-commerce owners in particular seem to be making. And I also think some of these mistakes are the reasons why Pinterest has gone unnoticed for the majority of the e-commerce space. So hopefully we can talk about that too.
Perfect. Yeah, I know my podcast co-host Jason Miles in our twice weekly show, the e-commerce leader now, has a Shopify site, and he and his wife get crazy traffic from Pinterest, and they have for years. So I know personally how incredibly powerful it can be. But yes, a lot of the time people are obsessed with TikTok now for some reason, even though I've not seen a single case study yet. I'm sure there's one out there. And if you've got one, please, if you're listening live and you know this, or post live on one of the socials, pop in the comments. I'd love to talk to you, but I've never heard of one, whereas everyone's talking about TikTok all the time because it's recent. It's the recency thing, isn't it? So you're right. It's a neglected channel. But I personally know of Jason as one great case study of Pinterest absolutely nailing it for e-commerce. So let's go through this then. We're talking about the mistakes people are making, and I suppose avoiding mistakes and doing the opposite is one way to really do well. So tell us about the first mistake. What is it that people are doing on Pinterest that is wrong?
Yeah, so I guess like when I came up with this list originally, these are the top 10. There's actually a lot more, that most people seem to do, but I think these are the big hitters that most people seem to be doing. So I think starting with the most obvious one first, which is, and I think this is a reason why when another platform pops up like TikTok, everyone leaps on that and still neglects Pinterest. So a lot of people, and maybe the census is shifting, but there is a big majority of people that think Pinterest is a social media platform. And because I don't know why this is, maybe it was part of like Pinterest marketing over the last couple of years. Maybe the messaging for themselves wasn't like correct and spot on. But what comes with the mindset of a social media platform is you focus on the wrong things. So for a social media platform, you're looking for engagement in terms of likes and comments and hearts, and all of that stuff is available on Pinterest. But if you focus on that, you're literally neglecting the fundamental of what Pinterest is. And Pinterest is a visual search engine. So if you know it's a search engine, then take steps in line with the search engine. So go and find out what people are looking for on Pinterest that align with your brand, align with your products, and then use that in favor of your product and brand, instead of just posting a pretty image that you or just to capture someone's attention just for the sake of engagement, when the better approach is to essentially use the SEO algorithm and use that in favor, and then just play that game instead of the social media game, because that's what it's there for.
I like it. And by the way, I would suggest that don't try to capture someone's attention for the sake of engagement is good advice, full stop, which is one
Yeah,
reason why I'm fairly skeptical about social media. I'm not saying that it can't work for brand awareness, for sure. But if there's brand awareness and then there's brand awareness plus action that eventually leads to a sale, which is the only reason that any of us can justify doing any of these things, right? So I really like that as a general piece of advice. And what I like about Pinterest that you've, unveiled this secret is that it is basically a search engine. And for me, search engines are a much better place to start
yeah,
with a rational based knowing beginning to see is there value in this, because if somebody is searching for something and you have a solution to that thing, then there is a starting point for a reason that eventually they might buy your stuff, right? So for
yeah,
me the
exactly.
logic is great. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you can use Pinterest in the similar ways to Google, where you can use the search bar and you can type in like very popular terms around your own product or your own brand, and Pinterest will give you other suggestions. So you can already see what kind of problems, pains people are going through, that because they don't have your product. So if you can align like the content you write to solve the problems that people are actually looking for and trying to overcome, then you're going to dramatically increase the chances of your content on Pinterest like staying around for a long time, rather than just putting up an image for the sake of it.
I like it a lot, yeah. And this is why I've never got my head around the whole Instagram marketing way of doing things. And I do, by the way, know some people. I've had a client in the mastermind for a while. He was killing it for his clients. It's kind of an agency, which is very unusual for the mastermind.
Yeah,
So Instagram can work. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a different way of doing it. It's more impulse led. It's a different world, isn't it? And it's one which is a bit alien to me. So whereas as you just said, if on Pinterest you can see what people are searching for, just like you can on Google, and God forbid, you can see using the Amazon search suggest tool. Those are super powerful things because they're telling you what people actually are typing rather than what you think they're
yes,
typing, and that's super valuable, right? It's actual data from the
yeah,
people you're trying to sell to. Like it
yeah,
a lot. Now, the next mistake is all around the boards thing. Now, I've created a billion Pinterest boards. Who hasn't?
yeah,
I'm probably falling into some horrible traps with this. What are we doing wrong
yeah.
here?
So essentially, what tends to happen is, um, I think a lot of people, when they start a Pinterest account, forget sometimes that they're using it as a business owner, and they don't. It's not front of mind that they're using Pinterest as a business owner. And what tends to happen is, when they're on Pinterest and they see something, they want to keep that piece of content, that recipe, that whatever, the family photos or whatever. And what happens is they end up wanting to keep it on their own profile. So what happens is, yeah, let's say you start a business account for your e-commerce brand, and you have all of the boards set up, everything aligns really nice with the content, everything aligns really nice with the products. And then all of a sudden you see something else totally relevant to your brand and your product, even maybe even irrelevant to like e-commerce in general, but you want to remember this pin. So people start creating random boards, something to do with recipes, something to do with food, something to do with holidays, like inspiration quotes. And all of a sudden you're like 6 to 12 months down the line and you have 200 boards on your Pinterest account, and 10% of those are only relevant for your product. So we don't know for sure because we can't test, but it's probably very likely that if you have a lot of irrelevant boards on your account, it's not going to help like the visibility and the searchability of your content if you have all random stuff on there. It's better to have a hyper-focused account around your product and your brand, and then keep anything like family, social, like recipes, food, keep that separate, or even make it an entirely different account, but keep the business account as clean and as crisp as possible.
Like it a lot. Clean and crisp. Those are fantastic words. Yeah, hyper focused is just generally a good thing as a general principle in business as well. Like these are lots
Yeah.
of tweetables, I guess. By the way, Twitter is
Yeah.
something I'm not comfortable with, but I get how it works. Like you don't sit on Twitter and try and write an essay. Although having
Yeah.
said that, I've seen very engaging posts where somebody told an entire story that you'd normally have like 15, 20 paragraphs on Facebook.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going down a rabbit hole here. So relevance is good. And as you say, this strikes me very, very much like the newbie error that people make with their accounts, where you muddle up your personal accounting and you pay for your holiday in the same account that you paid for your subscription to Amazon and your Amazon PPC, which is a total disaster for your accountant to make sense of. And this is like a public version of the same thing. So that absolutely makes sense to me.
I
And
mean, as an example, it hasn't happened for a while, but some clients we worked with in 2020 and 2021, it wasn't uncommon to have an account come to us, or a brand owner come to us, and would have 2, 3, 400 boards. And you're like, this is not going to work. We need to like really, really tidy this up. So we end up stripping like back to like 30, 40 boards max, and just have it really focused on the product and the brand itself.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Less is more often, isn't it? If it
Yeah,
less
yeah,
is the right thing.
definitely.
Yeah. Good. Now, third mistake, the hacking culture that we all have in our bones
Yeah,
as Amazon sellers.
yeah, it's really interesting, and I think like you see it on social media platforms. Ironically, it's like on YouTube, it's X amount of hacks to beat the algorithm, or like how to beat the algorithm in specific year or specific time frame, and we've never like we've used Pinterest since 2017, and then as an agency since 2019, and we've never taken the approach or mindset to like beat any algorithm, because you're never going to beat it. Like it's always there, it's there to be used, and there to be played. So instead of trying to like get one up on the algorithm on any platform, this is like universal in my opinion, but for Pinterest in specific, it's if you know that Pinterest wants things done in a certain way, so whether it's pinning at peak times, having a fundamental of SEO in place, like treating it like a search engine rather than a social media platform, like use that to your advantage rather than looking for hacks and shortcuts around the principles and the fundamental of the platform in the first place. So instead of like wanting to beat anything or overcome anything, just play the game.
Yeah.
Just follow the steps that all of the successful brands on Pinterest have done in the past, which is just treat it like a search engine, and use the SEO to your advantage, and just pin at the right times and the peak times for your audience.
Nice. Yeah. And I think that I can utterly understand why, as a marketing ploy, it's great. Like hack the system. It's a little bit like why I watch, spy movies. We all want to kind of beat the system and Big Brother, beat Big Brother and stuff. But the reality is, that's incredibly hard to do. I mean, especially people want to cheat the government systems. They're kind of clunky, and yet they still catch people and send them to jail for tax evasion. But like the online systems that are out there, especially Amazon or Google, I mean, come on, guys, you're up against the best in the world. You really think you're going to beat that? And Pinterest probably doesn't hire idiots off the street either. They've been around for long enough to develop a sophisticated system that will detect, silly behaviors that are there to get around it. It's just like, why bother? It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so with you on this. Like, I get so bored of the hack culture in the Amazon space where everyone's always looking to try and gain an edge on Amazon. I'm like, do you know how stupid that is? That's like trying to take on the American army with a unit of 2 soldiers. Like, it's going to
Yeah.
be a losing battle, guys.
Yeah, I mean,
There you
it's
go.
not going to, in my opinion, like the obviously the same as all other platforms, all other mediums, algorithms are in place, and they are there for a reason. And this is just my opinion of someone who's used Pinterest since 2017, and obviously now as an agency owner. I think the changes that have happened in the last couple of years have made the platform better. There's less spam on the site. So therefore, someone that's using Pinterest as a user has a better experience. So like if you just look at it from that level, it's making the app a better place to be for someone that's actually looking for ideas and products. So that has to be a good thing, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, although Amazon in its dragnet drags an awful lot of us down in various ways, it's unfair. They're trying
Yeah.
to do the same thing. As you say, it's about the user experience. And Amazon is obsessed with the user experience, and anyone
Yeah.
like Google is same. And I imagine if Pinterest is smart, they're doing the same. So yeah, if we
Yeah.
provide the same user experience that the platform is wanting us to provide,
Yeah.
then we're in alignment, aren't we? And then we don't have to fight. Yeah, I think it's wasted energy. I couldn't agree more with that. Great. So next one. What was the next area?
Yeah, so this is a common problem or mistake that like across the board, but specifically this seems to be a big issue with fashion brands and jewelry brands, where I think it's probably because the images are very nice for fashion and jewelry. They're very good photogenic images and very high quality. So what happens is people post those images and just leave it. So there's no text, there's nothing on it, there's no call to action, there's no price. So it's just a random image. And behind that image could be anything. Like if you have someone wearing 5 or 6 different pieces of clothing and a bag and some shoes and a hat, that image could be selling all of those products. It could be selling one of those products, and it may not even be a product behind it. It could actually be an article behind it. And it's going to not harm, but it's going to, it's not favorable to do that because you're confusing like the Pinterest algorithm essentially. Like, what is this image about? So because the recent changes on Pinterest now have the ability to read and scan text, so the algorithm and the AI technology can pick up text, why not put text on the image to say, this pin, you don't have to say it in these ways, but just be very clear on what is this? Is it an article behind the image, or is it a product listing behind the image? And if it's a product listing, say it's for sale, it's in stock, this is the price, and just encourage people to actually click through to buy. And also pre-frame somebody ready for when they land on the site, rather than by accident thinking, oh, this looks quite nice, I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what's behind it. It's totally different.
I love this. Again, there's just bigger marketing wisdom here because again, this comes down to fundamental misunderstanding of or vagueness about marketing, right? What's the purpose? Is it brand marketing? If
Yeah,
you're, Chanel, you do lots and lots and lots of expensive brand marketing. I mean, it's not direct response. You're not expecting them to click or call. There's no coupons attached to a lot of Chanel magazine ads, or think of other high-end brands, Mercedes-Benz, right? They're not
yeah,
expecting you to call the dealership. That's not the purpose. Whereas most of us are into direct response, i.e. you expect somebody to do somebody in
yeah,
response to that. And I think sometimes you can have pure branding images, can't you? It may
yeah,
confuse the Pinterest algorithm, which is interesting. I didn't know about that. But if you've got
yeah,
a link somewhere, I guess you're hoping somebody's going to click on it, in which case tell them why and what are they going to get. And that's exactly the same with Amazon listing images. Some of them are lifestyle images, creating a mood, a feeling, positioning the brand as expensive. That's brand work. And then
yeah,
some of them are buy our stuff because it does this thing for you, benefits,
yeah,
and you can believe me because this feature backs that up. And it's a similar thing. It's like if you want a direct response to your advertising, tell us why we should click, right? And,
yeah,
and it comes to the same thing, which it's so interesting that a lot of Pinterest feels like what you're saying is sort of generic marketing mistakes anyway. Sticking
yeah,
personal stuff up there, no call to action.
yeah.
Same stuff on Amazon, I think, in
I
that
just
working.
think it's actually, you're adding value, in my opinion, by being clear about what is behind the image to somebody that's actually found that image on Pinterest. If you can be clear in what is going to happen when they click through, that's helping that person take another step into hopefully buying that product, or taking an action that you're looking for once they click through to the site, instead of just being vague. And I kind of understand, especially with fashion and jewelry. The images are amazing. Like, you have very good images for fashion, men's and women's. And I guess there's an element of, I don't want to put text on it because this image is good.
Yeah.
But the image needs to be
Yeah.
utilized in a specific way.
I think you just need to be very, very clear. Are you creating art or are you
Yeah.
creating advertising? And the difference is there's commercial intent on advertising, whereas art just needs to look beautiful, right? And I think there's always a tension between, creating something beautiful and then, being so witty and clever and abstract that nobody knows what to do
Yeah.
next. And we've all seen those adverts on TV, right? Where you just think, well, you know what? They've just spent $1 million or, per week on this, and I still don't know what to do. That's actually not very smart. And there's quite a lot of those, right? And there we also all remember the awful adverts that we actually hate, but they stick in your head, and you remember the brand for decades, right? So I think that sadly, there's that commercialism has to be part of the thinking, doesn't it? So I know that
Yeah.
people making other text errors on their pins. When people do use text, what do
Yeah.
they get wrong?
So this is basically the text does not match the image or the pin on the video. What tends to happen and what people seem to do is sometimes there's an incongruent message with the text and the image on the pin to what's behind, like the image itself, on the site itself. And what tends to happen is if the text isn't aligned with the image and the content on the site itself, what happens is people will click through and leave very, very fast because they're seeing one thing, whether it's the image or the text telling them something, but then when they land on a piece of content or the product listing, if it's not exactly what's behind it in as very clear as process as possible, people will leave quickly. And the faster people leave, the less Pinterest are going to show that piece of content on that pin. So it's going to downgrade how freely they're going to show that image. But on the other hand, if the text aligns with the image and is very aligned with what's behind the image on the site, and people click it and stay, that is going to do the opposite effect. They're going to show that image more freely. So it's just about it's kind of tied into the other point, which is just be as clear and concise as possible. We actually tested quite a few things in 2020 and 2021. And what we tried to do was we took the first image on a piece of content. So not so much for product listings, but for blog content. We tested tons of different things. And one of the things we found was the first image on the piece of content is the one that people recognize and remember the most once they've clicked through. So what we looked to do was we took that image and used that on the pin itself rather than other images. Because with Pinterest, you can make 5, 10, 15 different images for the same piece of content. And what we found was the image, the pin that had the first image of the blog tended to perform better. And it's probably because people recognize maybe it's subconscious. They saw one thing and then they clicked on the site and they saw the exact same thing. Again, we don't have actual data. It was just tests that we run ourselves. But there's definitely weight in having a very clear image and text that aligns with actually what's behind and active on the site itself.
So interesting. I was looking at a Facebook ads training the other day, and frankly, most of it wasn't very good. But the one thing that I took from it is that your color, and if you use an image, the images that you have on the ad need to be consistent with that on the landing page. It's the same thing as, I guess, subconsciously, well, maybe semi-consciously, we're all afraid of being scammed or ending up, going on a phishing site where our data will be stolen or whatever, or just kind of having our time wasted is more of a conscious fear, quite rightly, because of terrible advertising. And what happens then is that if we're looking unconsciously for inconsistencies, right? And consistency creates trust. It's weird, isn't it? How visual stuff like that is so powerful. So it's fascinating that, again, it feels to me a lot of what you're saying, whilst it is obviously testing and very specific to Pinterest, don't get me wrong, you guys have done your homework, but it's showing up general principles of marketing, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also saw it with some of the paid ads quite recently, like towards the end of last year and right now. Sometimes the colors on the images of the creatives, if they aren't like, they will always be closely related to the branding of an individual client, but sometimes a product listing or a piece of content won't always have the same branding, all of the branding colors on the piece of content. So sometimes there's an image that doesn't always represent the colors that are on the site. And what happens is they don't convert that well. But if we have a creative that has the same branding, as in like the very specific colors on their creative and the site, the time on site seems to go up and the conversions seem to be marginally better. So yeah, it just is like be as very consistent as and clear as possible on a conscious and unconscious level.
Yeah, it's one of the things about branding that people miss is they think it's about a logo or a color set, and I think it's about a logo or a color set that resonates with your market first of all. But secondly, it's being massively consistent, and the good brands have brand guidelines that are very specific about the logo and the colors and where you use them, and a whole document about that. And I think that's one of the things that I see missing with early
Yeah,
stage entrepreneurs. That consistency isn't there, and it's very hard to get unless you make a conscious effort, right? So I
yeah,
can understand, I can completely forgive and understand why that would be, but you've just
yeah,
given concrete evidence of why it's really
yeah,
important. So yeah,
yeah.
very
Important.
interesting. So what's the next area that you?
So this is related to a new feature. So in the last year, what Pinterest rolled out was something called a story pin. And a story pin was kind of essentially the same as Instagram stories and Facebook stories. They on Pinterest, they rolled it out and they pushed it quite hard, but it flopped. It didn't function. You couldn't take an action, if that makes sense. All you could do was view within Pinterest app itself. You couldn't actually do anything. There was no links. There wasn't anything you could interact with as anybody as a user on Pinterest. So creators stopped using them and it just died out. But what they put in its place is something called an idea pin. And an idea pin, in my opinion, are very powerful because what you can do, you can essentially tell a story. So the best analogy for this, before we go into the details, is it's the same as running or creating an Instagram story where you have multiple images, or you can take something for a video for like 30 seconds and then you can create multiple different slides. It's the same concept, same as Facebook stories. What Pinterest have done with the new idea pin, which is amazing for e-commerce owners, is you can add a clickable link, and that clickable link takes you to the product listing on the shop feature of Pinterest for your brand. So what this is essentially doing is it's guiding users to make a purchase, make a buy-in decision, or take a buy-in decision based on the products. And what tends to happen is, I don't know why, but most brands are not putting that link into their story, whether they're not realizing that Pinterest has changed from a story pin to an idea pin with a clickable link. Maybe that's where the mistake is happening. But you can now add a link into this from the start right the way through to the finish of an idea pin, and you can link that directly to products. So if you are making idea pins, definitely add in the clickable link, which at the minute can be done on a mobile app. So you can't use the laptop. You need to do this in the mobile. So you can put everything up on the using the laptop, but that link you need to use the phone.
Great. And this would come under the heading of perhaps sort of positive hacks, which is to say it's not a hack trying to get around the algorithm. It's just like it's a little way of doing it. It's a little bit
Yeah,
awkward. You have to use the mobile app. Most people don't know it exists. So
yeah,
that's really positive because it's what Pinterest wants you to do. So that's an example of using a fairly hidden feature that maybe they're not banging on about enough.
yeah,
But on the other hand, it's absolutely what they want. And by the way, the best way to get on an algorithm side is to use a thing they really want other people to use, but most people aren't using it yet. That's why TikTok looks so sexy, folks. I hate to break it to you, but in about 2.7 years or whatever it is, they're going to start charging the heck out of you to reach your audience,
yeah,
just like Facebook did, like everybody does. It's not
yeah,
subtle. So but the reason it looks so good is because you're aligned with their strategy, not fighting it. So
yeah.
this is really good. I like this a lot. Now,
I
the
mean,
next mistake. Sorry.
I was just going to say, as an example of how much they're pushing this, where because my agency is part of what's called a Pinterest approved partner program, we have some access to some information that's not like freely available. And one of those information items that we have is it's very likely that the end of this quarter or the beginning of next quarter is that the story pins that I mentioned with the clickable link, they will be able to be run as paid advertising. And once that happens, that's going to significantly change how ads, I think, are going to be run on Pinterest. They're going to have the same strip like you have with the stories on Facebook and Instagram. I think that will feature very heavily for Pinterest, and there's going to be paid ads within that function as well.
So there you go. So my prediction for TikTok is pretty much coming to you for everyone, which is to say they're commercial companies and they have to monetize, and the way they monetize is ads. So it's actually inevitable that they're going to do that at some point, right? So they're not there to provide a service for the sake of it. And
Yeah.
but that means again, if you get into it now while it's organic,
Yeah.
you're going to get better value traffic, and also once you've got good at sussing out the detail of exactly what creates clicks and ultimately sales, which by the way leads to attribution questions we'll have to talk about later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the seventh mistake, I'm going to just reveal this because I'm curious about this. You said don't use a scheduler. So
Yeah.
how I'm a bit afraid immediately as somebody who's always trying to sort of figure out how to not spend his entire life on social media whilst run a business. How do we
Yeah.
get round doing this at scale? That sounds a bit scary.
So I think it's probably better to like maybe pre-qualify this with what we've tested, because we didn't want this to be true. Because using a scheduler reduces upfront time and back end time of pinning, especially when you pin in on volume. Like at the minute we pin, before we realized this had happened, we were pinning anything from 10 to 15 times a day per client every day. However, in 2020, towards the end of 2020, and then most of last year, all of the clients' accounts that we were using and were active on Pinterest, we were using a scheduler, and we were using a very specific scheduler because it's part of Pinterest's approved partner program. So it's basically an approved integration that Pinterest said is approved and it's okay to use. So we use this one. We wouldn't even use any others because some accounts were getting shut down for not using very specific schedulers. So it's like, okay, we're just going to use this one. What looked like, well, it didn't look like, it definitely happened. All of the clients' accounts that we tested at this particular time in 2021, they were slowly declining day by day, small percentage, like very, very small percentages. And if you looked at like day by day, you couldn't really see it. But then when you zoomed out and looked at the course of a year, this was not seasonal. This was not like a fluctuation in anything. It looked like, and we're pretty certain, that using a scheduler was dampening down the reach of any content that was pinned through the scheduler. So what we did was one account at a time, we started manually pinning, and we slowly started to see accounts that were notoriously high with traffic. Saw this dip with using a scheduler. Then we pulled them out of the scheduler and manually did everything slowly. And we saw the accounts begin to rise again, back up to higher levels than before. So that was interesting. We had to figure out what to do. Fortunately, Pinterest has a very, what's the word, basic scheduler within the platform. So you can actually schedule pins ahead of time for up to 14 days ahead using Pinterest's own scheduler. So if you know your peak times, which you can pick up from your Shopify Analytics or Google Analytics, and in Pinterest Analytics, it will tell you when people are interacting with your images the most on it with your account. So you can pick the peak times and days to still pin at the right times. So even though you can't schedule past 14 days in advance, using Pinterest scheduler, you can definitely still do this. And it's something that we do. And we pinned anything from, depends what the account is, but anything from 5 to 10 times a day. So the volume has come down, but we've seen the reach go up from not using schedulers and manually pinning through Pinterest.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it does sound like you're actually using a scheduler. It's just not an external one, and it's
It's
yeah. I mean,
Pinterest.
14 days. It depends how organized you are. For me, 14 days in advance sounds enough. Obviously,
Yeah.
in your case, you're running an agency, then yeah, there's a bit of a nightmare. But most people don't have quite that level of intensity with Pinterest use. So that sounds like there's a way around it. Well, I'm breathing a sigh of relief because I was just thinking, I know another social media account to manually manage. I know
Yeah.
LinkedIn was very funny about scheduling a while ago, and
Yeah.
they all go through waves of being precious with this stuff, don't they? So again, they're trying to wrestle control from us, and we're trying to manage the process. That's quite
Yeah.
reassuring. So last couple of mistakes.
I think they wanted, like same with all platforms, they want people to actually be on the site. With Scheduler, you don't even need to log into Pinterest. You can just do it offsite essentially. But yeah, I think that's the direction they've gone. So it's not something that we use anymore.
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, of course, they want you to be engaged and wasting your time, and we all just want to be efficiently getting it done and moving on because we're trying to be
Yeah.
business-like. So yeah, I could see that
Yeah.
tension. Okay, what's our next mistake?
Yeah, this is quite common, and I think it's because just I don't think people realize. But if we go back to the first couple of points, it's well, Pinterest is a search engine, relevancy is important, SEO is important. So one of the key things to do anytime a pin goes out via the Pinterest scheduler, the first time that pin goes out, it must go to the most relevant board first. So by most relevant board, let's say you have a piece of content that is, I'm just going to make this up because it's the only one I can think of at the minute. Let's say you have a piece of content that is called 10 benefits of matcha powder. On your board, on your Pinterest account, there are likely going to be a number of like boards that are mildly related to that topic, but the more specific it can be, that's the board to pick. So if you have a board called matcha or a board called health benefits of matcha or benefits of matcha, that is the one to pin to. Pin to the most relevant board first and always. There is also an argument right now, and again, it's not something we've tested fully, but we're only pinning the same piece of content once. So that means it has to go to the most relevant board first, because we're not pinning that piece of content again for a long, long time. So it has to be in the most specific and relevant board first. And this is something that Pinterest have talked about like dozens of times in live interviews and live streams that they've done. And they keep saying over and over again that relevancy is important. So I think just pay attention to that one and just pin to the most relevant first.
Absolutely. And like any search engine, relevancy is the most important thing, isn't it? It's the same on Google or Pinterest. It's all about relevancy. On Amazon, it's mostly about relevancy, but also whether you buy stuff. So, but I mean, any search engine based thing, the number one thing is relevant results, right? If clients, if searchers don't get that, they're going to move away from the platform. So you can see why you're aligning yourself with the long-term health of the platform. That's going to be, again, it's going to be hard to imagine a time when relevancy isn't going to be important on any of those platforms. Good. So last couple of mistakes. What's the next one?
Yeah, I actually just said this by accident because it ties into the relevancy factor. Is before, and this actually goes back to like I think the Pinterest algorithms improved and there's less spam on the site. So pre 2020, you could take an image, you could make a pin, and you could link it to your site, a product or piece of content, and you could take that pin and you could pin it over and over and over and over and over again. So if you saw a pin was doing well and it was getting traction organically, it would be absolutely fine to then just keep repeating that pin. Sometimes in the same time frame of an hour, you could just keep pinning and pinning and pinning, and it would grow. It would continue to grow and go viral. That's changed a lot. So you can't do that now. If you do, it dampens down the reach of the original version of the pin. So I guess the mistake is to not keep repinning the same thing over and over and over again. One and done is a totally fine mindset to have. The only time that wouldn't come into play is if you have something that's very seasonal. So we'll just take Christmas as an example. If you pin something around Christmas because it's a Christmas piece of content and it links well, yes, pin it the year it goes out, but then it's probably going to be just fine to pin it again the same time next year because such a long time period has passed. If it did well, you could reuse that again.
Yeah. I guess if there's that much consistency in people's use of a single platform over the entire year, then that's it's a pretty quality problem to have. But yeah, I'd imagine that does make sense. I could see that. And again, as you say, the platform's just getting more sophisticated, so we just need to roll with that rather than fighting it. I guess by the sound of it. Mistake number 10, last one.
Yeah. So again, this goes back to I think maybe Pinterest not knowing what they were entirely until quite recently. And previously, like hashtags were a thing, and you would see dozens and dozens, it would be hundreds of accounts put hashtags everywhere. So they would have them in the description of the pin. They'd have them in the description box for boards. They would be everywhere. Sometimes people were putting them in the bio on their account. And what happened is spammers and bots caught on to hashtags being on Pinterest, and they were hijacking very popular content. And what they would do is they would find extremely popular content for individual hashtags, steal that pin, and then redirect it to their own site. And that was a big issue for a long time. Like, stealing pins is an issue in Pinterest, but it doesn't seem to be as bad as when people were using hashtags. So the hashtags were actually making it easier for spammers and bots to hijack really good content and redirect it to their site. We still see it now. We still see people using hashtags now, even though Pinterest have literally come out and said, stop using it. You're making it easy for your content to be hijacked and stolen. But we're still seeing it pop up time and time again. So yeah, just take them all out and just use that space for descriptions and keywords and phrases instead. It's a much better strategy.
Nice. Okay, so it's pretty simple. So let me get this straight. Pinterest allows you to use hashtags, but they're telling you not to. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they
How does
are
that?
changing this. They are changing this slightly. So before, anytime you put a hashtag in, it would turn blue like a hyperlink. Now, when you put a hashtag in, you don't get that blue hyperlink. So they're slowly phasing this out. And I think what people are doing is they're just using the hashtag, and it's just taking up space. Whereas
Okay.
before, whereas before it was a legitimate link, like you use on Instagram. And when it was a link and it was something you could click on, that's when like the problems were with people stealing pins.
It's interesting that the Instagram seems to be coming up a lot as a sort of comparison point because it sounds like almost Pinterest thought they were Instagram for a while, and it's not how Pinterest works, and they're
Oh,
figuring this out. And as you figured out through your testing and extensive testing across a lot of different brands, I'm guessing because you're an
yeah,
agency owner, then they're actually the truth is that Pinterest is a search engine and that's how it works, and Pinterest is working that out. So it seems like really that the danger is don't treat it like Instagram, to put it in a nutshell, including
yeah,
hashtags. The stories don't work the same. It's not
yeah,
about likes, comments, engagements, or hearts, whereas it feels like Instagram is almost all about that. I'm a bit sort of prejudiced against Instagram, and I need to be careful because that doesn't mean people aren't making millions using it
yeah,
correctly.
yeah,
And, it's the same with any platform, right? But it's interesting how the the way of thinking and the use cases, because it visually looks similar, it
yeah,
is fooling people because it's vastly different. So it's very, very interesting. And listen, you're obviously very, very expert in this stuff. You've done some deep diving and some proper testing. So if people want to actually, get you to do this, because it obviously sounds like a lot of work to do well, like anything done properly.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you guys offer.
Yeah, so essentially we have it's a done for you service, 100% done for you with all of our clients. And our core offer is we will start, run, grow, and manage all of your organic growth and paid advertising at the same time. So that's our core offer. It's we will take care of all of the organic work, and we'll also take care of all of the paid advertising, including making the creatives, setting, optimizing, and monitoring all of the paid ad campaigns, and yeah, just everything that is involved with paid and organic.
Great. And just to be very clear, on Pinterest, sorry, there I'm getting confused. On Pinterest only, right? You just do Pinterest, nothing else.
We only do Pinterest, yeah, and I
Yeah.
think we saw the changes that were happening on Pinterest, and we're certain that Pinterest is favoring e-commerce in particular, and there's a ton of different reasons why. But we saw a few things happen in 2020 and 2021 that we could just see this is a big direction and big push that they're going in. So yeah, we only do Pinterest and we only work with e-com brands.
Fantastic. Really super focused. I like that a lot. I know you guys also offer a few different things, like you got a real-time dashboard that people can monitor stuff on. That's really reassuring. What
Yeah,
else is fun you're going to experience working with you guys?
yeah. So one of the things we implemented at the end of last year is we so the paid advertising platform on Pinterest is great, but there's a ton of data behind it, and it's a bit full on if you don't know what you're looking for and where you're going. So if we're running paid ad campaigns for clients and we were just making our own reports or sending someone to like the analytics part of the paid ads, it's quite a hassle to try and figure out what to do and where to look for the specifics of a campaign or a creative. So what we've done this year is we've created our own real-time dashboard that's interactive. So you can change the dates, you can see the spend, you can see the click-through rate, you can see the return on ad spend to add to carts, and also for the checkouts as well. And it changes, so you can see when things are happening, like as much as you can in real time. And the feedback we've had from clients is this is easier to use. It's just one sheet or one document that changes when you're using your phone or viewing on the laptop. So the feedback we've had has been, yeah, pretty good so far.
Nice. I like it. A lot of platforms, and I'm not really familiar with the Pinterest one in that level of detail because I've not used Pinterest paid ads myself, but
Yeah.
I know that, Google Analytics particularly, but Google ad platforms just, and a lot of the ones out there can be pretty unuser friendly, to put it politely. And the interface is just, I don't know, somehow nobody's ever told these guys that most of us don't want all that data and that it's horribly presented. That
Yeah.
there's a billions to be made consulting with Google about that. But I think, you guys have obviously seen that coming, and I think that's important, the visibility of stats, right? So that well, two things. Number one is that you understand whether a platform's working for you and your brand. And number
Yeah.
two, that you can see, and this is a really critical point with PPC agencies generally in the Amazon space, but also in your case, if you're using an agency, you need to have visibility of financially the return on investment for that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've got a nice clarity there. So that's really, really cool
Yeah.
to hear. So if people want to get a bit more of a taste of what you do before committing to working with you, I know you're offering a free audit, which is great for listeners. So tell us a little bit more about what people will get.
Yeah, so essentially, if anyone listen to this, when they listen to this back, and obviously they feel Pinterest would be a good fit for their brand and product, what they can do is if they go to the contact page on my site, which is pinandgrow.com, you'll see the contact page. If you book a slot in the calendar and tell us about your brand, fill in the questions, and then at the bottom there's a section for other. And if they put the name of your podcast in and say that they've listened to the show, we will audit the Pinterest account if they have one. If they don't have a Pinterest account, we will do an overview of a brand analysis to look for suitability, because obviously not every brand is going to be suitable. So we will give a decision on, is this a good fit or is this not a good fit?
Yeah, really helpful. And by the way, that assessment of is this for you is often overlooked. Everyone so goes, oh, TikTok, I'm just going to do that, and Pinterest, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And often the most valuable decision is don't do this or not at
Yeah.
this stage or whatever. So that's very valuable. So just go to www.pinandgrow.com, folks, and fill in the contact form. Mention either podcast 10K Collective or Amazing FBA, and you'll get that. I know that one thing you've got coming up that's not there yet, we should look out for, is a free training Facebook group, right? Which may, but judging by our schedule, we're live late February. We may be going live with the podcast episodes probably in April. So this may be there. So if you're listening, this may already be live. Tell us a bit about that. Give us a bit of a tease.
Yeah, so essentially, between myself and my paid ads team, we're going to, and the rest of my organic team as well, we're essentially going to make a Facebook group. The Facebook group's only going to be for e-commerce owners to understand Pinterest. Within that group, we're going to give away as much content as possible. And what that means is we're going to drip feed over time all of the information you'd ever need to start a brand on Pinterest using organic and paid advertising. So we're going to literally give everything. I think I mentioned this to someone the other day, and it was, I would, one of the vision items of the group, and I guess the mission of the group, is to give away as much as possible and give away what other people are charging for, because we don't make our money essentially on content. What we're doing is we're bringing people in, helping them figure stuff out, and then come to us when they're ready to hand over everything to us. That's how our model works for the Facebook group.
Yeah, very generous. So I'm just thinking if I were a Pinterest trainer, I'd be quaking in my boots because you're going to take away my income. Fortunately, not the case, and that's a very generous offer. Obviously, the fact that you're an agency and therefore that's where you make your money means that in terms of training, you can be very generous, which is fantastic. So look out for that. If you got a URL or a place people can go already that you know about, or is that going to be coming up?
Yeah, what I can do is I can provide the link for my Facebook profile. It's quite active at the minute in terms of like posting content around Pinterest and some other stuff that supports it. So yeah, anyone that's listening can click the link to the my Facebook profile as well. That's
So that's
probably the most active I'm on right now.
okay. And how do people get to a Facebook profile? Have you got a redirect to that from Pin and Grow, or is it just go onto
Yeah, so
Facebook?
it'll be on Facebook, but it'll also be on the website as well. If it's not,
Okay,
I will add that in.
great. So people need to look for Craig Lewis, presumably, or you call Craig Lewis Pin and Grow. What's your sort of Facebook?
Just Craig Lewis. Yeah,
Craig Lewis. Okay, I was just thinking there's probably quite a few Craig Lewises
it
in
is
the
a
world.
Craig
Well,
Lewis.
we
Yeah.
will we will put a redirect from our the 10K Collective site. And folks, if you're listening or watching, 10kcollective.com is where you will find the latest podcast episodes for this, including this one. Well, look, Craig, that's been fantastic. We were supposed to be talking about Pinterest attribution, but actually, there's been a lot to deep dive into here. So let's put a pin in that, not to
Yeah.
coin a phrase, and I'm sure you hear that joke a lot of times. And
Yeah.
let's revisit that another time because I'd be very interested in that. But that's frankly going to be for a very small percentage of the audience that is really nerding out about attribution. But this has been a really useful list. Could you just summarize what your list of the 10 mistakes that people make, and then that will be really useful summary for people.
Yeah, certainly. Let me just go back to the top, just to make sure I get the right order. So yeah, mistake one is avoid using it like a social media platform. Uh, Avoid having irrelevant boards on your account. So keep it hyper focused and specific to your brand and products. Avoid trying to beat the algorithm and just play the game. So know what the algorithm is. It's a search engine, so use it for all intended purposes. Have a call to action on your images as much as possible and be clear about what the image is and what's behind it. Have text that's congruent with the image and the content behind the image. So on your site, be as clear as possible. Number 6 is add the link into the idea pin and link this to your product on your Pinterest account. Avoid using a scheduler. So avoid using a third-party scheduler. That's probably a more accurate way to describe it. Use the Pinterest scheduler and schedule 14 days in advance if you can. Pin to the most relevant board first. So don't be scattered in the approach. Be as relevant and specific as possible. And then number 9 is have the mindset of one and done. Just pin a very good image with very good text into the most relevant board first, and don't pin that again. And then number 10, avoid using hashtags unless you're a fan of people stealing your content. Then use it.
Yeah, great. I love the fact that basically what you're doing is what Pinterest is telling you to do, but still allows you to do. Don't use hashtags. So that's
Yeah,
we're almost ahead of Pinterest if we don't use hashtags.
yeah,
Really, we're doing what they wish they could stop people doing. That's it's very funny that they still allow you to do something they're telling you not to do. But I guess
yeah,
things go through waves, right? Like us, they're busy experimenting all the time.
yeah. Very true.
So that's great. A nice clean 10-part checklist to go through. And I bet that I can't imagine there's anyone listening who isn't making at least 2 or 3 of those mistakes. So that's really super valuable. As you said, you're giving away, crazy, crazy levels of value because that's not how you guys make your money. So that's really helpful and valuable. Quite excited to find an off Amazon platform that I believe has a very rational sort of principle behind it, that it is a search engine, but it's a visual search engine. And for me, the link with e-commerce is inevitable. And I'm
Yeah,
amazed, I'm delighted that Pinterest has realized this because that sounds like they're going to align themselves with us as e-commerce sellers and our needs. So that's really delightful to know. And last thing, Craig, is just to say many, many thanks for coming on this
yeah,
show.
yeah. Thank you very much. Been good fun, and I hope people that listen to this back that were maybe confused about Pinterest or thinking about starting it, maybe they can take some of these and avoid making these mistakes when they get started.